We're going to look into the anatomy and circulation of the heart. So if you actually look into a heart, people, it looks like it's complicated, but in reality, if you look at it schematically, it's very simple to understand. First of all, something we have to understand about left and right. When we talk about the left, for example, if I ask you what your left arm is, which is your left arm, it's your left arm, not my left to my left. So when you're naming or um, pointing out any anatomy on somebody or on any person or in any organism, you take their left and right. That's why on here on this drawing you're going to see left and right sort of like opposite, but in reality, if we were looking um, the heart like here from the front, then this would be the right hand of the person and this would be the left hand. So that's why it's uh, the other way around. Anyway, so we have four main chambers to the heart. The top ones are atriums, and the bottom ones are ventricles. So very simple. Top right, top left, left atrium, right atrium. Bottom right, right ventricle. Bottom left, left ventricle. Okay, very simple. Now, blood vessels. Blood vessels that Um, we normally know them as those that have oxygenated blood and those that do not have oxygenated blood. But in reality, it has more to do with if they're coming in or out of the heart. So when a blood vessel comes out of the heart, okay, it's called an artery. That's why the bottom ones are arteries because they're taking blood out of the heart, okay? And the ones that are taking blood into the heart are veins, okay? So that's the difference between a vein and an artery. So, um, let's start by the simple ones. The the right ventricle pushes blood out into the lungs. That's why it's called the pulmonary artery, okay? And then that blood comes back from the sorry about that comes back through the pulmonary veins, okay? There's a right and left, just as your lungs, you have a right and left lung. So these right and left veins come into the left atrium, okay? So those are very simple to remember because they have to do with lungs. Now, the the blood vessel that carries blood from all your body is called the vena cava, okay? And you have one that comes from the bottom of your body and one that comes from the top. That's why you have two. So you have a superior and inferior. So as you can see, there's always going to be getting to the heart two veins, two pulmonary veins, two vena cavas, top and bottom, in this case, like right and left. Arteries, you're only going to have one that later on are going to split. And the other one you have to learn is the aortic artery. This is the biggest artery you have in your body, and we're going to see in a minute that it makes like the first thing it does is make an arc, okay? I want to clarify something about this drawing. It's schematic because then sometimes we get confused if the blood actually goes down, if it goes up. We're going to see that in a minute. It's just so that you can have a schematic idea of how the heart works, okay? So those are the heart. We just talked about the heart chambers, the heart, and also the blood vessels that arrive and go out of the heart. Now we're going to talk about the valves. There are valves that go between the chambers and valves that go between the chambers and the arteries, okay? And this is just so that the blood doesn't go out when it's not supposed to. So, the one that goes between the right and left, the right atrium and the right ventricle is a tricuspid valve. Okay, tricuspid valve. Why is it called tricuspid? Because if you look at it, it has three parts. Okay, on the left side, between the left atrium and the left ventricle, you have the mitral valve, also called bicuspid valve, whatever you prefer. This one, it's called bicuspid because it's made out of two valves, okay? And last but not least, we have the valves that go between the ventricles and the arteries. So these are quite simple to remember. This one is the valve that goes between the right ventricle and the artery that goes to the lungs. Therefore, it's called pulmonary valve. Then we have the valve that goes between the left ventricle and the aortic artery. Therefore, it's called aortic valve. Okay. So this is a very crude way of path of how the blood runs through your body. Okay. So as you can see, it comes from the rest of the body to the heart, then goes out into the lungs. It does the exchange of blood. So as you can see, this artery carries non-oxygenated blood, and this vein carries oxygenated blood. So we can't use that definition that if it carries oxygen or doesn't carry oxygen. And then after it goes through this process, it goes out to the rest of your body again, just to go back. So this is a big cycle. Now this is a true schematic of the heart. Okay, so if you look at it, it's a lot. If I were to give you this image from the beginning, it would be a lot harder to understand. But now that we've understand it schematically, we're going to look at it anatomically. Okay, so number one, we said number one were the vena cava. So as you can see, you have an inferior that comes from your abdomen, and then you have the superior that's coming from your head, from your upper limbs, and other parts of your body. So you have the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava that reach which chamber? The right atrium. Okay, so the right atrium is this one here. And the next step is when this atrium contracts, it squeezes the blood into the next chamber, which is the right ventricle. But before that happens, it passes through the tricuspid valve. Remember, this is a valve made up of three parts. Okay, so the next thing that happens is the blood goes into the right ventricle. Okay, then as you can see here, there is no artery that goes down. In the schematic it says it goes down, but in reality, if you look at a real heart, it actually goes up. Okay, and this is quite logical when you think about it, because your heart's between your lungs, so it shouldn't go down to your stomach. It should go up again to go left and right to each of your lungs. Okay, so it goes through this artery called, you got it, pulmonary artery. But first it has to pass through a pair of valves called the pulmonary valve. Then it goes through the pulmonary artery. Okay, so it goes to the lung. There's the exchange of oxygen and CO2, and then the blood comes back. It comes back through what? If it's coming back to the heart, remember, it's a vein. So you have the right vein, the right pulmonary veins, and the left pulmonary veins. Remember, this is the right for the person, and this is the left of the person. Okay, so left and right pulmonary veins that reach a chamber called, since the top, it's on the left, it's the left atrium. Okay, then when this atrium contracts, it pushes the blood to the left ventricle, but first it passes through the mitral valve, or the bicuspid valve. Bicuspid because it's made up of two parts. Reaches the left ventricle, and finally it's expelled through the aorta, okay, or aortic artery, whatever you want to call it. And there's a valve between them that closes so that the blood doesn't escape when it's filling up, okay. And here's what's interesting. As you can see, the aortic artery in the schematic says it goes down, but in reality it goes up. And if you think of this, it's quite logical. Obviously, the hardest part for the blood to reach is to go upwards. It's very easy for it to go downwards. So it takes advantage of the pressure it generates from the beginning, and it goes upward, and it obviously goes to our most important organ, which is our brain. Okay, so this aortic arc allows blood to go in an upward motion from the start. And then these big arteries you see here are actually the start of your carotids, the biggest arteries you have that travel through your neck and that obviously take blood to your head. Okay, so I know this drawing at the beginning seems quite complicated, but once you understand the schematics and how it works, and you understand, you get the starting point and the end point, you can find the rest of the parts. So don't be afraid about it. Okay, so something else that's important to understand about the heart are the nerves in the heart. There are nerves because it, after all, is triggered through a nervous impulse that contracts the heart and it's all its chambers. So where does this signal start? We have the sinus node, and the sinus node is the one responsible. If you see when it lights up, it sends a signal to who? To the atrium. So that's why it's called the sinus node. And this one sends signals to the atrium to contract. Okay? And as you can see, they don't contract at the same time as the ventricles. And you also have to observe the valves. As you can see, we actually have two contractions and a period in which they fill. So the atriums actually contract first, then the ventricles, and then they both all of them relax to allow them to fill up. Okay. So this is basically creating a bigger pressure inside the heart that allows the blood to travel through all the body. Okay. The next node, as you can see, all the impulses eventually reach that start from the sinus node, eventually reach this node. And as you can see schematically, this node is in the middle right between the two atriums and the two ventricles. Therefore, it's called atrioventricle node. Okay? This atrioventricle node stops the signal for a minute, allowing the valves to open and close depending on what's needed, okay, and depending on the valve. And then it once again sends the signal to the rest of the heart, which in this case is are the ventricles. Okay, so the ventricles then contract and squeeze the blood out through the arteries. Remember, we have the aortic artery and the pulmonary artery. Okay, so how do we call each of these processes? When it's contracted, we call it systole. Okay, so we have a atrial systole and we have a ventricle systole or ventricular systole, sorry. And when it relaxes, when all of the chambers relax, we call that diastole. Okay, and as it says here, it happens at the same time. Something else to remember, there's a membrane around the heart. And why is this important? Why is this membrane so important? There's a membrane around the heart and also a membrane around the lungs. This is important because this membrane actually has a fluid between both of them that allows the heart and the lungs to move independently. So even if you're breathing inwards or taking air, your heart can still beat in contract and relax. Okay, so this is very important. This all creates two types of basic circulation. We call it systemic and pulmonary circulation. Let's start with the second one, pulmonary. So as its name says, it's the circulation that goes between the heart and the lungs. Remember, the heart pushes blood to the lungs. There's an exchange of oxygen and CO2, and the blood goes back to the heart, and then the heart sends it to the rest of the body. So this cycle between heart and lungs, right and left, is called pulmonary circulation. The circulation between the rest of your body, the heart, and the rest of your body, be it upwards or downwards, whatever you want, is called the systemic circulation because it irrigates the rest of the systems. Okay? So, as you can see, it's quite simple. Okay? Don't get scared. It's just a matter of understanding the schematics. I hope this was helpful, and as always, if you have any doubts, please don't doubt in asking.